Blog Talk Radio.
Alternative facts.
The following message is transmitted at the request of the United States government. At 12:07 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, numerous unidentified objects of unknown intent and unknown origin were detected at high altitudes over multiple locations of Earth's outer space by the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, and these objects are presumed to be some form of controlled aircraft. It is not known if more of these aircraft will arrive, or if they will attempt entering Earth's atmosphere. United States citizens are encouraged to monitor local media outlets, as more updates will follow as information becomes available. The following message is transmitted at the request of the United States government. Attacks by the undead have been reported in several states across the country. The dead are rising from their graves and are attacking the human race. At this time, it is expected that more attacks of this nature will occur in several other states in the next few hours. The intent behind their attack is unknown at this time. He has been observed that a bike or exchange of fluids is a method of transmission. This is an extremely dangerous situation if they crave the taste of human flesh. It is not known whether this event will last for hours, days, or even longer. Stay calm, as authorities have been dispatched to deal with these creatures. An all-clear siren will be sounded when this situation is under control. Pacific Standard Time, nor is detected a long-range nuclear missile launching. This missile is believed to be headed in the direction of all residents within a 400-mile radius of this area should seek a fallout shelter immediately.
Welcome to Within the Chaos with your host, Rodney the Viking Shortridge, co-host, Melinda the Raven Jackson. Want to give a big old shout out to the Facebook paranormal groups that allow us to post our shows on their pages and helping us to get the word out about all of our guests. Also, a shout out to the Connor sisters. Hats off to Misty and Ashley. They are the founders of SOS Sisters of Salem Paranormal Research Society and host of their podcast, Paranormal Party. You can find them on Facebook under Paranormal Party. If anyone would like to speak to Black Diamond Paranormal Society, BDPS, to discuss your paranormal questions or issues, go to our website at blackdiamondps.org or email blackdiamondps@yahoo.com. As always, our services are free.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. You can listen in by calling 516-387-1922, or you can go to the Vibe Radio Network website at blogtalkradio.com/Vibe Radio Network. For deep within the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for listening to Within the Chaos. My name is Rodney Shortridge, and I'll be your host tonight. along with my beautiful Raven, Melinda Jackson. First off, I'd like to give a shout out to my cousins up in Ohio, Jennifer and Joe Shortridge of 222 Paranormal. If you get a chance, check out their talk show. You can find them on Facebook under 222 Paranormal.
Have your devices just randomly stopped working? Are you having IT trouble? Not to worry, Mead's PC Repair Shop can help. We also offer IT support too, including website hosting. We are now also offering full event management services. To find out more, contact our friendly customer service team who will gladly help in any situation. Just call 276-880-8900, or if you prefer, you can stop by our shop at 1089 St. Clair Street, Oakwood, Virginia, 24631 by appointment only, or by visiting the website at meadspcshop.com for more information. Thank you.
Well, howdy, everybody. Well, I'm kind of dragging butt. I've been kind of sick the past week, so if I mess up, misspeak, misdo anything, I have an excuse. I even got a doctor excuse for it. But tonight our special guest is a returning guest that we've had on before. She's a beautiful and amazing person. Her name's Heather Arnold. Heather is a graduate of Syracuse University's Newhouse School. She had a 10-year career in television industry as a copywriter and as a marketing and sales executive in Los Angeles and Manhattan, followed by a 5-year career in pharmaceutical sales in Manhattan. In the early 2000s, she was given the opportunity to move from New York to the Caribbean island of Aruba to start her own touring company, where her quest for historical accurate tours led her to the discovery of the Giants. After a successful run with her company, Heather returned to New York, where she continues to pursue the history of the Giants of the Caribbean and began detailing her finding in her book, The Islands of the Giants, The Lost Race of Giants of Aruba, Bonaire, and Caraco. Her research detailing giants remains found within the Arubian Cave was recently entered into the National Archives of Aruba in August of 2018. Heather is the curator of the Facebook group Stones, Bones, and Paranormal. She currently lives on Long Island, New York, joyfully raising her amazing daughter, who is of Arubian descent. And next, I'd like to apologize for last week's show. I had technical problems, and I was supposed to have on Amy Green, a paranormal researcher, but don't worry, rescheduled her for June 20th. So I do appreciate you all understanding all that, and that I seem to have a lot of technical problems. But I get through it one way or the other. But enough of that. Let's go ahead and get Heather on here. Hello, Heather, and how you doing? Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi, Rodney.
You doing all right?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Oh, good. Well, thank you for that glowing introduction. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. It don't take an introduction. You just walk into the room, and the room glows.
Oh, that's so kind of you. Thank you so much. You're making me blush.
Oh, you're welcome. It's good to hear from you. Talk to you again. It's been a few months, but I was excited to get you back on the show. I didn't care if they had to hook me up to IVs and wheel me into the hospital to do it.
Yeah, I was worried. I thought, when you said you had the flu, and I had the flu too a couple of months ago, and it just knocked me down for a week. And I thought, oh no, poor Rodney. But thank you for being such a trooper and still having me on tonight. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Matter of fact, I had, I think it's about 2 years ago, I actually had a heart attack, went to the hospital. They checked me out, said everything was fine, that, I stayed there for a few hours for observation. And then I told them, I said, well, I got to go. I got a show to do. And they said, like, well, we need you to stay overnight if you can. I said, do I have to? And they're like, no, not really, but we would like for you to. And I'm like, hey, my people go first.
Wow. Oh my gosh, Rodney. Well, you are dedicated. That's for sure. And we all appreciate it. But take care of yourself. We need you.
I try. I'm like one of them old pickup trucks that you ran hard when you're young, and now you just take it down to the convenience store and bumper falls off, or a tire falls off, or something like that.
Oh, I'm very impressed with your dedication. Really, thank you so much for keeping our appointment this evening. I'm very happy to be speaking tonight with you.
Oh, well, everybody, I noticed there's a lot of talk on Facebook and everything. People excited to have you on. So enough of me talking. Let's get you talking. So can you we'll start out for the ones who haven't listened to the show last time you was on. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what started you on this journey to becoming a researcher of giants and megalithic sites?
Oh, sure, no problem. So it all started when as you explained in the intro, I had this tour company in Aruba. And Aruba, just so people are aware of where it's situated in the Caribbean, it's about 16 miles north of Venezuela. And so I went there and I started this tour company. I did Harley Davidson rentals and tours and private Jeep tours. And I really wanted to get historically accurate tours, and I found it very difficult to find historically accurate information about Aruba, at least going as far back as the Archaic period, probably about 5,000 years ago. There and up until when the Europeans came, which was in the late 1400s. So it was. There was a lot of what I would consider, kind of biased information that clearly was from a European standpoint. And I realized that the children in school were being taught that their island was called the Useless Islands. Because there was nothing of value on the island. And I had a real problem with that because, for example, there is gold in Aruba. And the island of Bonaire and Curacao and Aruba also had an abundance of Brazilwood trees, which were very important, particularly to the Renaissance Europeans, as those trees produced a dye that they would dye their velvet clothing and tapestries with. So when I was doing this research, and by the way, when I bring up all three islands are called the ABC Islands: Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. They were at one time one island, but through a series of tsunamis became three. So through my research online and at the local archaeology museum as well as the local library, I began to research the history, and I couldn't really find a lot. Believe it or not, it's actually, I've been researching the giants now for over 10 years. I just got a hold of an archaeological study that I've been trying to get a hold of for 10 years. So this information that I'm basing my entire book on, which is the archaeological record that's been published, it's very hard to get a hold of this information. It's really just held within the halls of academia, and a lot of copies are just missing. When I find some of these archaeological reports, some of the pictures of the giant bones have been ripped out, or the archaeological conclusions have been just ripped out of just missing. The pages are missing. So through digging further and further, I uncovered that the islands were at one time called the Islands of the Giants, and that they were actually referenced as the Islands of the Giants on maps and in government documents, one of which is actually in Caracas, Venezuela, as we speak, from 1525. So these islands at one time were called the Islands of the Giants based off of an interaction that Amerigo Vespucci had with the people of Aruba and Curacao in 1499 when he came over here on several ships from Spain, and he met with the mainland Venezuelans, who he and Christopher Columbus before him had struck up a relationship. And these mainland native populations told Amerigo Vespucci and his crew about these islands and called the Islands of the Giants. Now, you can see Aruba from Venezuela, and you can see Venezuela from Aruba. So this was an island that was in visual sight, and it was an island that the mainland population had tried to get to. Both Curacao and Aruba, they had tried, and I'm sure Bonaire as well, tried to get to these islands, and they were always fought off by these giants. And they told the Europeans this, and of course this was tantalizing to the Europeans, and of course they had weapons, so they weren't afraid, and they had just sailed halfway across the world. Nothing was going to scare them, and of course many of their goals were gold, to capture people, any sort of treasures, to stake claims to land, as well as map the territories. So they wasted no time, and they took one ship over, and they landed in Aruba. Now, there's controversy. Where did they land first? Where they did that 100% landed in Aruba. I have mathematical proof of that. I worked with a cartographer for 2 weeks who analyzed the entire map where it was originally noted and determined first they went to Aruba and then Curacao. And Vespucci writes when he returns back to Europe a rather harrowing tale of what happened on those islands when this ship landed on the shores of Aruba. And he immediately, and he and his crew, see giant footsteps in the sand. And he becomes curious, of course, what are these footsteps? How big are these people? These people must be massive. And the crew and the team, they go in further inland into Aruba through a forest of Brazil wood trees, which no longer exists. They've been cut down to extinction by the early explorers. And they find a village. And in this village are women, giant women. Vespucci notes that if they were kneeling, they still would be taller than the Europeans when they were standing. So these, based off of some of the clues that Vespucci gives within his letter, his description of this actual first interaction, we estimate that these women are probably between 7 and 8 feet tall. And they're two teenage girls he meets who are about 15 years old, he surmises, are probably close to a little over 6 feet tall. So clearly big people. Furthermore, it's not just that they're tall. We're not talking about like modern day NBA, WNBA players who are maybe like string beans. We're talking about people who are massive. Their shoulders, from one shoulder to the other, is immense. Their jaws are bigger. Their heads are elongated. They are robust individuals. They are very intimidating. So the crew is beckoned into one of these huts that Vespucci doesn't really describe in detail how these huts are created. We're assuming how they're made from mud and probably straw. And they're brought in, and the women begin to, try to communicate with these men. And the Vespucci notes that the women are actually very intrigued by how tiny the Europeans are compared to them. So then the Europeans, Vespucci and his team, begin to think, maybe we can steal these 2 young girls and bring them back on the boat and give them to the king and queen as gifts and as proof of this island with giants. And as they begin to concoct their plan, to capture these girls, 36 men walk in to the village square, and they had just apparently been on a hunting trip of some sort, and they all are brandishing gigantic weapons, and Vespucci goes into details describing them, saying one is like a sword and a hammer combined, and the one was like an axe, and the head of the axe was almost as long as Vespucci's entire body. So these magnificently large weaponry, which immediately intimidates the explorers, who then begin to abort mission and return back to the ship. And as they do so, they are followed and trailed the entire way by these 36 heavily armed men who are even larger than the women they had just been conversing or attempting to converse with. And as they get back to the ship, the giants come out into the water and start shooting arrows at the ship. And they quickly scurry away, with the ship sails away, and Vespucci notes in his letter that he felt he was going to die that day. He feared for his life, which is incredible. Here's a man who just sailed clear across the Atlantic Ocean for months and felt most nerve-wracked when he was dealing with the giants. And consequential maps of the islands of Aruba and Curacao had the names of those islands not as Aruba and Curacao, but as the islands of the giants. And so this is the beginning of me uncovering a situation where here is this unbelievably, incredibly important story that kind of has just been skipped over. I never knew of this. The people of Aruba never heard of this. They're not being taught this. And so I began to continue to do some digging. And what I found out was there were many giant skeletons, giant bones, giant skulls that were unearthed by archaeologists. One of the largest skulls that was unearthed was from the island of Curacao in a cave, and that skull was over a foot long, which is much longer than a Homo sapien, modern Homo sapien skull. Also, the things with these skulls is they're elongated. So this differentiates them from modern anatomy of a modern human, or even of a later human of the mainland population of Venezuela, for example, who did eventually get over to those islands. Their anatomy is entirely different. The giants had very distinct anatomy, and these bones and these skeletons keep coming up, and they keep coming up in the archaeological record, and yet, again, still we hear nothing of this. I mean, I never heard of archaeologists finding giant bones in these islands. I never heard about even Vespucci's stumbling across them. And yet, here it all is. And as I've said, it's just taken me so long to get all of the information gathered, because it's so nearly impossible to get a hold of. And as you read these archaeological reports and see the measurements of these skulls, of these skeletons, of these femurs, of their hands alone, the hands alone are of a giant of a giant size, you can't help but want to put the story together, and that's exactly what I'm doing now with my book, The Islands of the Giants. So eventually, the islands, they get different names. Aruba becomes is kind of a mix of a bastardization of a Spanish term that the Spaniards gave to the island, meaning gold there is, because they did find gold on that island. And then Curacao and Bonaire keeps its name that they've always had. They're assuming it's a name from the giants, but it's mispronounced. And then Curacao, there's no real idea of how Curacao gets its name. But so then all of the population is hauled off these islands, and then they become slaves. But at some point they come back. So it is believed that, and archaeologists have shown that at one point, when the Europeans, at least when the Europeans arrived in 1499, that the giants and the average statured humans, which were from mainland Venezuela, were living together at the same time. So although the giant remains that are found generally date at least back to 5,000 years, there are giant remains found amongst burials with average statured humans. So there was a coexistence going on, excuse me, between the giants and the average statured humans. My assessment through my study of the burials in particular, which are very distinct, it leads me to believe that the giants were a ruling class of people, that they were heading up all three islands, and that the average statured people, who were essentially interlopers because they weren't the indigenous population of Aruba, they came from Venezuela and maybe even Colombia, and then settled on these islands and were allowed to do so, obviously, by the giants. What role each of them played with each other, I'm not quite sure, but clearly there was an overlap between the two populations, and they were coexisting. Eventually, they were mating and creating hybrids as well. So when people say, well, where did the giants go? Well, they began to, mate outside of the giants and create a hybrid. I don't want to say race, but essentially, really, it is kind of a hybrid race, or definitely creating a mixed gene pool with the average statured population. And the genes of the giants still exist within the population of Aruba to this day. So that's proof that there was a hybridization that occurred, and that the islands, the giants essentially did not die out, but did continue on with modern humans even to this day.
Well, was anything mentioned about the 6 fingers or the double row teeth of the giants that they found?
Yeah, that's a great question. Now, their teeth are different. They do not have double rows of teeth nor 6 fingers and 6 toes, although that is a common theme here in the United States, in North America. I just was in New Mexico. I saw tons of 6-fingered handprints. They're all over the place if you know where to look. 6-toed footprints everywhere, and double rows of teeth. In Aruba, in Bonaire and Curacao, the giants were a little bit different. They did have distinct teeth. The teeth were very robust. They were almost all the giants are, when they find their skulls, they have almost a full set of teeth, which is incredible. The teeth are shovel-shaped incisors, which probably most likely has to do with their diet. Their jaws are bigger, and their jaws, their mandibles, attach differently to the skull because the jaws are wider on the giants than they are on modern humans, or even the later occurring humans that visited and stayed on the island. Their skulls are positioned. They do have the correct amount of sutures as modern humans, but they're positioned on the body differently because the skull is elongated, and the elongation of the giants goes backwards, goes to the back, not up like the Paracas elongated skulls of Peru, but they go up and to the back. So because of this weight redistribution, the way that the skull is fixed on the backbone is in a different position, so as to accommodate this imbalance of weight, most of the weight being in the back of the head. So in terms of their hands were huge, were large. As a matter of fact, one anthropologist who studied one of the skeletons said they were the largest skeletal remains of human hands she has ever seen. And but they all had 5 fingers and 5 toes. But interestingly, on the island of Aruba, there are repeatedly handprints of 4 fingers. 4-finger handprints show up a couple of places on the island, and the archaeologists who studied them, 3 different ones, make note of them as 4-fingered handprints. There are drawings, some of the drawings of what would their human-like figures have 4 fingers. This could be something mystical that they're drawing about, or it could be another race that we've yet to uncover that had 4 fingers. I know that in the United States there are people who have found 4-fingered handprints. I think there are also some in Australia and in Africa. So that's something that is prevalent in other places in the world, and I have not figured that part out yet at all, who were the people with 4 fingers. But the giants did not have double rows of teeth or the 6 fingers, but they did have elongated skulls, and they were light-skinned with light hair. They were not Native American as such in terms of a darker complexion and black hair or darker hair. These were what the archaeologists in Aruba explained to me, more European-looking people, which is incredibly interesting, particularly given what's coming out recently in the world of anthropology and archaeology regarding the Denisovans and how they were, our ancestors, and some modern humans still have Denisovan genes in them, and they were huge, robust giants, 8 feet tall or more, and they were from, Northern Europe. So it begs to differ. Were these people we see in Aruba, these giants, and we see in Bonaire and Curacao, were they a hybrid of the Denisovans? And, how far back do they go? Is there a crossover with the DNA? I mean, it's completely fascinating to think that there was this species of giants who pretty much dominated the earth at one point. And, how the 6 fingers and the double rows of teeth come in and why some of them have it and some of them don't, I think it's just a matter of who they were mating with. There must have been a group of giants or some sort of hominid that had this anomaly, what we would consider today an anomaly. Now, you look in Chaco Canyon, I've been there several times. The people in Chaco, most of the population had 6 fingers and 6 toes. So it could have been something that was more common then that petered out, or it was just a totally different group of giants that were existing, an offshoot that was completely divergent from the giants we find down in the Caribbean. I'm not quite sure, but they did not have those anatomical anomalies that we know of.
Well, were, or do you know, I don't know whether you know or not, or is any other scientific research have shown, where did giants originate from? Did they come out Africa like where Homo sapien and Homo erectus and all of them came from, or did they originate from somewhere else?
Yeah, that's a great question, because some think, the Denisovans were the descendants of Homo erectus, and that Homo erectus came first, and then the Denisovans. So the Homo erectus was huge, really giants, and then the Denisovans got a little smaller, and then of course the Neanderthals. They were now the Denisovans and the Neanderthals. We find them in Europe. They found Denisovan bones now in Tibet. They found Denisovan bones in Taiwan now. There's possibility of Denisovan bones in the Philippines. So the Neanderthals are from Europe, but now they're finding that they're finding more Neanderthal bones creeping down even to Afghanistan. They found a huge cave filled with tens of Neanderthal skeletons. So, I don't know. I asked the archaeologist in Aruba, where does he think they came from? And he said he thinks they came from Egypt. So, it's such a curious question. Where did they start from? I mean, if you read the Bible and you look at the Bible as a historical document in the Old Testament that says that the Bible the giants were created from an unholy union between human women and the Nephilim, or these fallen angels, and that's where the giants came from. So there are a lot of theories. I don't think any one of them is more incorrect than the other, quite frankly, because we just don't know where they came from. I mean, if you see the islands of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, they are specks, literally specks in a giant sea. And even when those three islands were one island, they were never part of the mainland. And it's still very, very small. I mean, the island of Aruba is only 20 miles long and 6 miles wide. So these are very small places. Why did they think to go to Aruba and Bonaire and Curacao? How did they get there? Where did they come from? It's very curious. And, I would love to know where they came from. But we do find global connections with the giants all over the world. I think the only place we haven't found giant bones yet, and I say yet because really I mean I feel maybe they are there too, is Antarctica. It's probably the only continent where there have not been any giant remains documented being uncovered that we know of. So they could have really come from one area and spread out, or they could have emerged all at once in separate areas, but I just don't know. It's a great question.
Okay. Well, I know you had the opportunity to examine the Caracas skulls in Peru. What did you find that was so unique about those skulls?
Yeah, it was great to see those skulls. I had a couple of days in Lima last April, and I was able to actually see these Paracas elongated skulls. They are very strange. As soon as you see them, you just are puzzled at the way that those skulls shoot straight up into the air. There's this huge bump in the forehead. The back of the right below the brain case, where the backbone would meet the base of the skull, there are two holes. We don't have these holes. The skeletons of the Caribbean do not have these holes, and a lot of them first they had red hair. A lot of them had still red hair stuck to the skull, which was very strange. Their eye sockets, like the Caribbean giants as well, their eye sockets are larger and lower, and a lot of the skulls that were on display in the museum in Peru showed evidence of having had brain surgery, which is very strange. And some of them, they took, after the surgery, they put a piece of gold over the hole that they put into the skull to, I suppose, relieve pressure in the brain. But why so many skulls needed to have pressure relieved is beyond me, because several of the skulls on display showed this type of brain surgery having been attempted on these people. So it was interesting to see these skulls, because I know that this elongation is also occurring in the giants of the Caribbean. However, not the same elongation. And Brian Forster pointed out, he's actually written a book about the cranial elongation. And his belief is that the skulls, similar to the ones found in the Caribbean, that don't go straight up, but go up and then back, are of a hybrid race, and who that hybrid, who if one is from Paracas, who the other one is, we don't know. But the DNA evidence of the Paracas skulls shows that they, their ancestors or their place of origin is Northern Europe. So, which would explain also red hair. I mean, the red hair is very strange. And so, I made some correlations between the giants in the Caribbean in that with the red hair, and the archaeologists telling me the giants in Aruba and Bonaire and Curacao had light hair. They were light-skinned and light eyes. And in death in Aruba, and all three of the islands, when there's a burial, they would bury the giants and then exhume the giants after they had become skeletons, and then color the head, the elongated part of the skull, in a red ochre, which was actually locally sourced manganese that was coated on the top of the head. And I immediately wondered, I wonder if there's a correlation that did these giants, like the Paracas elongated skull people, did they also have red hair at one time, and this was kind of some sort of ode to them or to their red hair? I don't know, but it was so interesting to see those skulls in Paracas. I think the work that Brian does with them is incredible, and I'm so happy I finally got to see those skulls. It was something that I was going to do no matter what if I was going to be in Lima. And by the way, anyone who's thinking of traveling someplace in South America, go to Peru. It's an amazing place. I didn't go to Machu Picchu because my main goal was to get to Easter Island, but I did spend enough time there to know it's just a wonderful place, and the food is fantastic, and it's very inexpensive, just expensive to get there, but once you're there, it's good. So, and where I saw the Paracas skulls was in the museum in Lima, the National Archaeology Museum. So that's right in downtown and easy to get to, and definitely worth the visit. So it's incredible to see those skulls, and what's even more incredible is how few people even know that there are these skulls. There were these people on Earth who look like that and were walking around, and some of them were quite tall. Again, in Nazca, they believe that the Paracas people were taller than the people who came in after them. So, was it also partially due to their elongated skull that added to the height? I'm positive that is the case as well, but they were definitely not average statured people. And by average stature, I mean like compared to average statured people of today, that are walking around today, modern humans.
Mm-hmm. Well, I recently did a DNA test on myself and got the results. Got the results back a couple months ago, and what really surprised me was I have 1% Peruvian, 1% Colombian, and 1% Mexican in me. And I was like,
what was the last one? I'm sorry, it broke. The last one was what?
Mexican.
Wow, very interesting.
I thought it was because I have a few other people that I know that had the test done, and they have like 4 to 6 places that are marked on the world map of where their DNA is, been found. And mine, when I got it and I showed them, they were like, "There's no way." They're like, because like 80% showed German, but in Northern European, Sweden, Norway, so forth like that. But it moved all the way into China, Vietnamese, and then all the way over to South America. I was like, somebody in my family was doing a lot of traveling.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I on my Facebook group, Stones, Bones, and the Paranormals, a couple of people have shared their DNA results, and some of them have Neanderthal DNA in them, which is incredible that it just shows that this DNA is still showing up. Some people still have Denisovan DNA, some people still have Neanderthal DNA, and in the case of Aruba, some people still have the DNA of the giants in them to this day. So that's very strange. You wonder how did all that happen? And clearly, if we're going back thousands of years, these people were traveling by sea. I mean, they were definitely seafarers. There wasn't any way that, you can look around it any other way. Even the giants in Aruba, they clearly had to have come from something. I mean, I don't know, maybe they sprung up from the ground, but the reality is these people were traveling a lot and probably trading and intermingling. But I think that's incredible. I love those DNA tests. I did one for my daughter because she is Aruban, and I wanted to see her ancestry. And she has 25% Native American DNA, but the Native American that she has is from South America, not from North America, which is actually makes more sense since Aruba is close to South America. But I think it's amazing, and I want to do the test that determines if you have Neanderthal DNA, because that would be such a cool thing to know that you have Neanderthal DNA. But yeah, that's incredible, Rodney. That was great that you did that too, to see that. Which test did you do, by the way, if you don't mind me asking?
It was the I think it's GTI. It's a company out in Nevada.
Okay.
It's a little more expensive than, say, 23andMe or something like that, and because I wanted a little more detail, and I do want to go through National Geographic and find out about the Neanderthal and all that. I think that'd be great to find out.
Yes, I think it's so cool. Yeah, that's incredible. I'm going to have to, I have to do mine next. I would like to do the mitochondrial DNA, because the mitochondrial DNA is the DNA that is, they say, is the most accurate because it goes through your mother. Mm-hmm. And all the females before you. And that's what they tested actually in Aruba when they were trying to determine what the Aruban population was made up of. And that study was in 2003. The geneticists went to the island of Aruba and interviewed people and got a pool together of individuals, and they had to have been native Arubans born in Aruba. Their mother had to be born in Aruba, and their grandmother had to be born in Aruba, and their great grandmother, and and the other caveat was they could never have left the island. So they never went and lived over in Holland or in Spain or in the U.S., and they always were living on the island. And it turned out after the analysis of that DNA that 70% of the Arubans today belong to the same haplon group, and 54% of them had pre-ceramic DNA in them, meaning the DNA of the giants. So it's pretty interesting to see how those genetics are maintained even through such an intermingling of other different cultures and ethnicities, particularly with the islands of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. They were first the Spanish came, then the Dutch, then the French, then the British, then the Dutch again. Spanish came in between a couple of times. So all of this intermingling of people, and yet the DNA, that ancient DNA, is still in a lot of our blood, which is just, to me, it's or bodies rather. It's just incredible to see the strength of this ancient DNA and how it still exists among the people. And now, interestingly, Rodney, just to go back what you were saying before about where did they come from originally, the giants. I'll be going to Bonaire in next month. Actually, I keep forgetting it's May. Next month, I'm going to back to Aruba and also to Bonaire. And Bonaire is a very interesting place. To this day, it's virtually untouched by time, in that it's still very sleepy, very quiet. There are no high-rise hotels. There are no stoplights on the island. There's no clubs or anything like this. No casinos. The island shuts down at 10 o'clock at night, and also a lot of interesting things are on that island. So, for example, the largest, most complete giant skeleton to be unearthed on any of the three islands was found in Bonaire. It's called the Bonaire skeleton. It actually was so large and so anatomically different from us that the archaeologists were forced to conclude that Vespucci was indeed right, that that there were giants on the islands. When he came, he probably encountered these giants. And so I'm going to go to the site where this giant was uncovered. And another interesting thing about the island is that there is a monolithic stone kind of in the center of the island. And it's called the navel stone, or the divine mother stone. And the mythology, the stone is made of limestone, and it's a natural stone. And the story behind it is that this is where the first people of the islands were born. And they came out of the stone. And in the middle of the stone, it's pretty high. It's a pretty tall stone, maybe 20 feet high. And in the center of the stone is a hole. And the people of the islands believe that this navel stone this mother stone has a direct connection into the center of the earth, and that's where the people come from. And the first person to inhabit the islands came through and out of this stone. And so to this day, the stone is revered by the people, and now it's just called the Bonaire stone, but the original name and the local name is the mother stone or navel stone. And the mythology around it is to gather some dirt from around the stone and always bring it with you, so you always know where you're from, even if you leave the island. And if you're sick, or if you have some question you're pondering for an answer about, or if you have any sort of imbalance in your life, to go to the stone and climb up to this little hole and sit in the fetal position of this hole, and supposedly you are cured and you will have the answers to your questions, and your life will return back to normal. So this is one of the places that is on my list of things to see when I went to the islands and visit Bonaire, because it's such a curious story. And not many islands in the Caribbean have such a creation myth such as this. And to think that this navel stone, in 1 year I'm seeing two navel stones. I mean, the first one I saw was in Easter Island, which is called the navel of the earth. And there is this round stone that is considered the actual navel where life came through. It is the connection to the mother of earth within the earth. And then to see in Bonaire, they also have a navel stone connecting into the earth where the first people of the island came through. It's actually quite fascinating. And the third reason that makes Bonaire so what I consider interesting and moving forward is going to be the caves and the petroglyphs. So Onaima is an area of Bonaire, not far from this navel stone, that has, I think, over 200, might even be more, petroglyphs within this cave. And there's so many different types of petroglyphs, but one set of petroglyph panel has what researchers have deemed to be potentially a star map, and showing the specific constellations as the sky would have been about 5,000 years ago, if not longer ago. So I'm curious to see this star map, and also if there are any solstice alignments, because I will be there during the summer solstice. And also in this cave is something interesting. Well, before I even get to that, outside of the cave is evidence of what I call the worship of the divine feminine, which I've actually found on all three islands. This is a stalagmite that sits in front of the cave, the entrance of the cave, that's been carved into the shape of a female, of a woman. And it's a woman with some sort of head covering over her head. And she kind of guards the cave, and to this day she is revered by the local population. And then inside of this cave is also what one archaeologist called Mayan petroglyphs, Mayan hieroglyphics. So he, through his analysis, and at the time of his analysis was the top Mayan translator. I don't even know if translating is the word, but he was able to make these correlations between the oldest form of Mayan writing, which was about 12,000 years ago, I believe. So he was able to see these Mayan symbols and say that they were Mayan, which it could very well be the case. I mean, there are allegedly Mayan petroglyphs in Georgia, in Alabama, some even in Florida. So it could be that the Mayans did come up through, up north and go through the islands and go through, into the United States. I know I've been out west with Jeff Woolwine, and he's shown me Mayan petroglyphs in the mountains of Arizona. So what I think is happening is that originally there were the giants on the island, and then consequential populations of differing people just popping in briefly and leaving, but leaving a mark, was occurring at these places. So these were places that were frequented by many different cultures who left their mark in some way, or maybe didn't at all. So that's another reason why I think Bonaire will be very interesting for me to check out, because it has so many curious sites that still retain the mythology of when they were, originally in use, and also, as I said, was the site of the largest skeleton ever found thus far on the islands. So I'm very curious to see that site and explore as well. So when we say where did they come from, the giants, well, the local people think they came from a stone that's connected to the inside of the earth. So who knows? I don't know. Anything sounds good because I don't have the answer.
Wow. Well, I know you spoke about you went to Easter Island, but what did you find at Easter Island? Were you researching or just vacationing or both?
Well, it was both for sure because, first of all, to see the moai and to explore the caves, it's always been a dream. And really, there's nothing similar. Now that I've seen the moai, now I can say, oh, that's very similar to the moai in Easter Island. And you can kind of make these global connections. But when I was there, I really wanted to see the petroglyphs and the pictographs and explore the caves, which I did. Not all the caves because there's so many caves, but I did see about 6 caves while I was there, and obviously see their megalithic cyclopean walls that they created, and of course the moai. And what I noticed, and when I came home after being in such an amazing place and every day being amongst the moai and just really exploring the traditions of the island, as well as the later Birdman cult that they call a cult which was after the original moai population, I believe, died out, was I realized that there are a lot of these symbols and the faces and the positions of the moai looked very similar to other statues, representations of humans, drawings on cave walls that I had seen in other places outside of Easter Island. And for example, after I came back from Easter Island, I went in November. I was en route to your conference and to speak at Phantom Fest, and I stopped at Grave Creek Mound in West Virginia. And at the gift shop, I purchased an original rubbing of the original copper plate that was found within the mound. And it was Adena. It was part of the Adena culture. Now, the Adena are also purported to have been giants here in North America who were responsible for building mounds. Some of the burial mounds, or maybe they weren't even all burial mounds, are still intact to this day, but most have been completely destroyed due to, modernism. And so looking at that stone, I thought, wow, some of the rubbing that I have of the copper plate, I noticed some of the designs were very similar to designs I had seen in Easter Island, particularly with the Rongo text, the writing of the people of Easter Island that has yet to be deciphered. It was a language that no one has any idea what they're saying, and it has roots, they believe, in ancient Sumerian, but I did see some of these symbols in the Adena tablet that I have. So you begin to make these connections and wonder what on earth was going on. And again, you see another, just like with Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, you see this island seemingly isolated. I mean, Easter Island completely isolated, but not as, the islands of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, clearly not as isolated as Easter Island. But here you see this completely isolated island that had, obviously someone was there, a culture that was capable of doing amazing things with stone, with writing, with art, within the caves. What people don't even realize, in the caves in Easter Island, and maybe they do realize, I didn't realize, that they had massive construction events going on within the caves of the islands in Easter Island. Within the caves of Easter Island. So you would go into a cave and there would be stone beds. There were stone chairs, stone tables. They would put stones on the walls to make it not so much as a cave, but more like an actual little home, or something a little bit more, I guess appealing and maybe a little more comfy looking and cozy looking, although you're still in a cave. But there was a massive amount of stonework that occurred within these caves, which is just, the magnitude of what was going on. So you really begin to respect these people on these small specks of land doing absolutely incredible things, and knowing that this is possible, that and that these people on these islands were very busy, and in the case of Easter Island for sure, very advanced in terms of how they were aligning their moai to solstices, to the equinox, to various to Pleiades. 7 of the moai are just waiting for Pleiades to rise. Some of the massive stone towers I saw on the north coast of Easter Island were just oriented to see the rising and setting of the Pleiades constellation. So you begin to, wonder, why were they so concerned with the stars, aside from growing crops and obviously, probably sea turtles. When were the sea turtles coming back? When were certain, migratory birds coming back? But it almost becomes an obsession, and the same with the caves in Bonaire with the star map. The star map takes up the whole roof of a very large cave. To go to those lengths to see where is Taurus in the sky, where is Draco, where is the Pleiades, where is Cassiopeia, it boggles the mind how much they were focused on the cosmos, and always the question is why. I mean, okay, you could see what the solstices and the equinox in terms of growing and monitoring, migrations of animals that you're preying on. I can't grasp what that component is all about, but just as the people of Easter Island were consumed with the cosmos, so were the people of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. As a matter of fact, what I've discovered just last year was that in Aruba, for example, there is a huge, massive megalith, of massive stones that forms a mound almost in the middle of the island. And if you have a straight line going down to another site that was very important to the ancient giants, and then put a line from that site to another megalithic site that I propose has consequently been destroyed by massive tsunami events, and then close that whole shape, you get a perfect isosceles triangle. And the isosceles triangles are huge geoglyphs, so they would only be seen from above, and their measurements are perfect. So with the measurements being the way they are with regard to the isosceles triangle, I think the statistical occurrence of it being random is 0.001%. So this was, in my opinion, of an intelligent design. And not only did their massive monuments on the island form isosceles triangles, but also their burials of the giants were in isosceles triangles. So, for example, at the angles where you would see the points, the angles of the pyramid, there were giant burials of giants. And then the lines that would form the triangle are made up of burials of quote-unquote average statured people. So I tried to figure out what it could possibly be all about. One archaeologist said it could be something with the stars. Another archaeologist in Aruba told me that it was to delineate families, which also could be true. However, when I discovered that there were massive isosceles triangles draping over the island, I realized that perhaps there was something going on in the sky. And when I was in Aruba last summer, it was when I realized that there is an isosceles triangle constellation that is usually only seen in the southern hemisphere, but can be seen from the islands for only about 2 hours, just around the evening, right after the sun sets, just till about 8 o'clock at night, between like 6 and 8 o'clock at night, and then it's gone. And this is a constellation in the shape of an isosceles triangle. So it's a very rare, it's a sudden, strange, fleeting occurrence. It comes very quickly, and then it's gone. So I wonder now, and I will continue to research this theory, was there a correlation between this fleeting appearance of this constellation and this which is in the shape of an isosceles triangle, and this obsession with isosceles triangles on the grounds? And interestingly, when I was in Aruba, I came back to New York, and I had a message from an Aruban who was studying archaeology in Holland. And he sent me a message on Facebook, and he said, I have always wondered, do you think there's something going on with these monuments on my island and triangles? Because if you look on a map, they all form triangles. I said, yes, I couldn't believe it. I said, it's incredible. And this guy's an archaeologist. I said, yes, I absolutely absolutely. And he equated it to another constellation, and the name has escaped me. But I said, well, maybe that it could be that one, but what about this one? And he agreed that's even more interesting. But so there's the correlation between Easter Island and the islands that I'm studying were that they were islands and that they were obsessed with the cosmos, with stars, with solar occurrences, other astronomical occurrences, and of course, in Easter Island, they say it's believed that the red hat that the Moai wear isn't really a hat at all, but is representative of the red hair that the original people of Easter Island had. And if you go back to the early accounts of the first explorers to the island, they did speak of seeing giant people on that island, as well as average-statured people. And they talk of speaking with some of the people in Easter Island when they first arrived, and them the people saying, yes, there were giants on the island. There were giants and average-statured people, and so there is again this connection with giant people and both places that are so far away from each other. It's absolutely incredible. And of course, again, you have to think these people were traveling via the water. I mean, there's no unless they had even more advanced technology. I mean, that would be even cooler. But for sure, there was something going on where these people were traveling and getting from A to B and doing it quite successfully. So yeah, Easter Island was an incredible trip, and if you can do it, I definitely recommend doing it. I want to go back again. I just loved it so much, and the whole time you're left with more questions than answers, and and you want to know, you really want to know why, how did they do this, and how did they stand them up, and why did they do this, and you just leave there still not knowing any of those answers. But it's another interesting component between Easter Island and the islands of the Caribbean is this worship of the female in the form of the Divine Mother. And some of the oldest moai on the island are female moai in Easter Island, and they're very different looking than the quote-unquote male moai, or what we assume to be the male moai. And particularly a couple of the female moai are pregnant. And this is something I found in Aruba. There's one stone that I call the pregnant stone, and it's a huge piece of diorite, a boulder that looks like the form of a woman with a belly, and in the center is a belly button that they've carved out. And this is something I also saw in Easter Island, which I couldn't believe that I was seeing. So there could have also, and what I hypothesize is that there was an ancient matriarchal society that had a reverence for the female, particularly a pregnant female or the woman as a mother, and which would make sense. I mean, if you want to sustain a small population, you should revere the women and obviously mothers, because that's how you're going to continue to grow. So that was actually another interesting part of my trip to Easter Island, and I didn't realize how much female imagery there was on those islands before I had gone, aside from some of the petroglyphs, etc. But I didn't know about those moai. So it was very interesting. It was a great trip, and thank you for asking. I hope I can go again in my lifetime.
Well, that'd be amazing to go. Well,
yeah.
Well, why do you think that the ancients, all over the world, were, so obsessed with the cosmos?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask an archaeologist or an anthropologist, they'll say it has to do with growing food, and that makes perfect sense, of course. in Easter Island, for example, there is a place where they're observing the solstice because at a certain point when there's a constellation above and it's a certain time of year, the sea turtles will come back from their migrations, and some of the seabirds will return at a certain time. So that makes, and they were eating they were eating the turtle eggs, they were eating the birds and the bird eggs. So this was a part of their diet. In Aruba, for sure, and Bonaire and Curacao. As a matter of fact, when my daughter and I go back, we'll be participating in the traditional harvest festival, which occurs around the solstice. And so the solstice was necessary to know, okay, now we have to harvest because now it will become the dry season on those islands. So that makes sense. But when you see, as in Aruba, massive geoglyphs mirroring constellations, and this is happening on the Earth, and they're creating massive monuments to make these geoglyphs. I mean, monuments that are so large, I don't even think modern machinery could move these stones. And then you see that you can only see this huge triangle, for example, from the sky. You can't even see it from the Earth. I don't even, there's no way. It's just too massive and the distance is too far. You have to ask yourself why are they so consumed with what's going on in the sky? And I mean, as above, so below, but was there more going on? Now, I will say that when I stayed in Aruba last summer with my daughter, we rented a home right by one of these megalithic sites called Io Rock Formation, and it has petroglyphs there. And I had very strange dreams. I mean, every night I was running from something or running to something, or I mean, these just crazy, almost nightmares. And I, a couple of nights later, had over for dinner at our home the head archaeologist of the museum in Aruba. And I told him, I said, I've been having these crazy dreams here every night. And because I was burning incense everywhere and trying to clear out spirits, if there was some spirits holding up in the house. And he said, well, of course you're going to, because you're staying right by Io. And I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, there are 7 portals in Io. And these portals, some will take you to other parts of the island. Some take you to Io. Some take you away from Io. Some take you to other parts of the earth. Some portals take you to the other 2 islands, Bonaire and Curacao. And he said things are coming in and out of these portals, and that's why you're having all of these nightmares. And so then I realized, well, I'm right by the summer solstice. And when I went hiking with Jeff Woolwine out in Arizona, he said that the best times, and he is a sky watcher, so he sees a lot of this UFO activity, which he attributes to beings, not to actual craft, but to actual beings coming in and out of fractures in the stone, essentially fault lines, and that these fault lines are portals allowing these beings to travel in and out, and it occurs before and after a major solar event, such as an equinox or a solstice. So that could be another component. Now, if there are indeed portals that exist, do they require opening only through certain cosmic events, such as a summer solstice or an autumn equinox? And do these events trigger an opening of these portals that allows for travel in and out of them? I don't know, but I think that's another fascinating component. What if it wasn't just about, because if it's just about food, why are you making monuments that, I mean, are massive. I mean, even here in New York, we have the megalithic chambers, and they are facing the summer solstice, the winter solstice, sunset at the winter solstice, sunset. I mean, it's all complex things. One follows a supermoon. One chamber follows Venus. I mean, why are you getting so crazy? And then if you're going to follow all that stuff, why are you taking 60-ton stones, 100-ton stones, and putting them in positions to trace these events? Can't there be an easier way? Couldn't you just draw a petroglyph or write something in the sand or carve something in a stone? Why do they have to make these megalithic monuments to commemorate these cosmic events? I think it's way beyond, excuse me, anything that we're even capable of understanding, excuse me, at this time. It's very interesting.
Well, what about the cataclysm? I know I interviewed Robert Forster a couple years ago, and he spoke highly of a cataclysm, and some other people I've had on the show have too. Well, what's your thoughts on that? Because from what I understand, it's something like happened like 12,000 years ago, and we've seemed to have lost the technology that we once were able to build these megalithic sites.
Right. That's a great point. Yes, because excuse me. So Aruba, I had said in the beginning of our discussion that Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, geologic evidence has proven that those three islands were one island at one time, and that it was a series of three mega tsunamis that came through and essentially sunk two major parts of those islands, and made them three separate islands. So, and there are deposits, there's geological evidence, and I have many studies that are in the bibliography of my book that people can reference all of my work, and I encourage people to do so. But they discuss in depth these mega tsunamis that came through. And as a matter of fact, I was watching in Aruba, there's a major lionfish epidemic. The lionfish is not indigenous to the waters there, and they are decimating the coral reefs and the population of the coral reefs. And so they have lionfish hunters who are spear hunters who go down off the coast of Aruba in the roughest of water, and they spear these fish. So I was watching one of these videos on YouTube, and I said, what is all this underwater? And I saw megaliths. I mean, 90-degree angles, and even the divers make note. Notice the strange boulders that we also see on land at Io Rock Formation and Casabari Rock Formation. And they were puzzled, and what were they doing there? And I mentioned something to the archaeologist in Aruba. I said, did you ever see that there are these huge megaliths under the water in Aruba? And there were a series of mega tsunamis that came through the island starting at about 3500 BC. And he said, well, it was a comet impact, of course, that caused it. I mean, he was just like, of course, he said, and the things he tells me privately, he'll never say publicly, just for the record, although it's a big gripe of mine, but okay, eventually he'll have to come around. But he has told me that it was a comet hit the Earth, and particularly in the area of probably where, quote unquote, Atlantis would have been, which would be in the middle of the Atlantic, maybe closer to where Cuba is, and that this comic impact caused these mega tsunamis, caused the three islands of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao to occur, and caused a lot of these ruins to fall under the sea or be covered by the sea. So if we're to then extrapolate and see, wow. So a lot of these ruins could be under the ocean due to this comet, comet impact. Excuse me, I'm just going to take a sip of water.
That's good.
Sorry about that, honey. So I think that's a great question. I think that a comet impact or series, of comet impact definitely caused a lot of these ruins to be under the water, then they are yet to be explored, yet to even be discovered. Maybe so far below the water that we may never even see them until a technology comes out that we could actually see so far down into the depths of the sea. Particularly, the sea around Aruba is some of the deepest ocean in the entire Atlantic basin. There's a part called the Aruba Trench that has mountains almost as high as Everest, if not taller, and they have no idea how they got there. No idea how the Bonaire Trench and the Aruba Trench are so deep, but it could be because at one point this was above ground, and due to this comet impact has now become submerged. It's fascinating. I'd love to see what the world looked like before the comet impact, which was in we surmise 12,500 BC, I believe it is.
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, that'd been great to see.
Yeah,
well,
I'd love to see what type of artifacts are down below, and that's just a whole other part of the puzzle that needs to be really researched. Because look, they found in I don't know how to pronounce it, but off the coast of Japan there are submerged ruins with 90-degree angles. They look like step pyramids. It's just incredible. And so there's plenty more to be explored under the sea, in my opinion.
I agree. We know more about what's out in space than we do under the ocean.
That's true. Good point.
Well, I know a lot of authors and researchers, have claimed the possibility of like ancient aliens that may have helped in the evolution of man. Could that be true? Could aliens have helped, or maybe even taught humans how to build, such enormous magnetic sites?
I always wonder that, and I'm always asked that too. I know that there is an archaeologist who he would never go on record with this, of course. He has told me he fully believes that the giants were a hybrid race of extraterrestrials and humans. He beyond a shadow of a doubt, he said we're too intelligently designed to have come up organically. And he feels that fully that we are a hybrid race of some sort of extraterrestrial group of people, beings, who decided to create a hybrid species, starting with, I guess, the giants, and then, of course, going down the line in terms of ancestry to us, that, it could be that way. I mean, because the technology seems to elude us. We don't know how they cut the stones. We don't know how they transported stones of that height, of that weight, and height. We don't know how they placed the stones. None of the stones, for the most part, have mortar. They're just positioned, leaning against one another in precarious positions that actually are maintained to this day. I mean, the chambers in upstate New York, they're at least 2,000 years old, if not more. And some of those slabs are 50 tons each that make up a core-belled ceiling of a semi-subterranean megalithic chamber. No mortar. They were cut. Some of them came as far north as Canada to these sites. They would look at Stonehenge, another place where stones were transported from far and wide. Same with ancient Egypt with the pyramids. And you see, and even in Easter Island, at Ahu Vinapu, there is a megalithic wall where you literally, there's no mortar used to put together these massive stones that make up this wall. You can't even get a piece of paper through the seams of these stones, and yet they are perfectly cut. They are almost melted together. So you have to wonder, how did they do this? And of course, it is quite interesting to think, was it aliens, who came down with some technology and taught the humans, and then the humans then used it in their architecture? That's a possibility. I always want to hope that humans are capable of doing something like this, and we just lost that knowledge. But then again, like you brought up, Rodney, you said, were they taught this knowledge? I mean, did someone teach them? Who taught that? Who came up with it? Because it was going on all at the same time on a global scale. This megalithic construction of on a scale that literally can't be replicated to this day in most cases, particularly in Vanapu in Easter Island, where it's almost as if the stone has been melted and vitrified. You have to think to yourself, where did they get this technology to begin with? And we simply don't know. And even in Aruba, I mean, massive boulders, balanced stones that are so large, balanced on top another large stone, and each of these balanced stones in Aruba points in the direction of another important site. So each of these balanced stones that we see in Aruba, which are probably one stone's probably at least 100 tons, one is probably about 60 tons. Nonetheless, you get the idea. They are positioned on top of an even larger stone, and then they are put in a certain directionality. So they're maneuvered into a certain position to point to the next site. So, for example, last summer I tried to follow where these stones were going. So one stone would point to another stone, and then another stone would point to a set of petroglyphs, a couple of miles away from that, and then another huge, massive stone would point to a former burial site, and it goes on like this throughout the island. It's just, it boggles the mind how these massive stones were put into place, and some of them carved, and you have to wonder, was the technology something from out of this world? I don't know. It is curious, and it is just another, theory, quite frankly, because we still don't know the answer. So, I mean, we should be open to all theories, quite frankly.
I agree, and there's a thing that I've always questioned, and we'll question you also, is with so many ancient sites across the world that are so similar in their build construction, how were they able to communicate with each other? Do you think how were they sharing this building knowledge? Maybe through one of those portals that you was discussing earlier, or maybe some kind of worldwide consciousness. Maybe that's something that I've often really wondered. No one's really touched on it.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you look at the balance stones. I mean, we see balance stones, or dolmen as they're often called, on a global scale. I mean, they're not just, that we see them in Australia, we see them in South Africa, we see them in the Caribbean, we see them in the United States. If I got in my car right now, I could drive you to a balanced rock that is called Balanced Rock, and it's balancing on 5 little stones, and it's a 60-ton mega boulder, and it's actually pointing in the direction of another megalithic site. Right here on Long Island, there is a massive stone called Council Rock. It's a huge piece of quartz crystal, and that stone points to Balance Stone in upstate New York. It boggles the mind. So how did the people in Aruba know about the balance stones in North America? What about the people in South America? And look at the design of pyramids. This whole concept of how pyramids are built. either whether they be step pyramids or smooth side pyramids, they all pretty much have the same basic shape of going up towards the sky and getting thinner as they go up into the heavens. And yeah, you have to think, how are they communicating? Okay, my theory is they were clearly traveling. They were visiting each other. They were communicating on their level through personal communication, is what I feel. Through sailing, maybe there was some even more advanced technology that allowed them to fly. I don't know. My Aunt Claire, she was a tour guide who did exclusive tours to Egypt. And she befriended an archaeologist, and this was many years ago. This was probably in the early 1990s. And she came back from Egypt, and she said that the archaeologist friend that she had, he was an Egyptologist, he told her that they found in the sands by the Great Pyramid a complete plane, an airplane that had been buried but was ancient and could function. And she was shocked, and I was shocked when I heard this. And I said, "Well, where is it?" And she said, and she asked him, "Can we see it?" And he said, "It will never see the light of day." That was his answer. I thought, wow, that is so weird. So could it be that there were people in planes flying? I mean, and that's another possibility. There are a lot of things that are discovered in archaeology that we're not aware of and that are pushed away because they don't fit the narrative that a lot of people have spent a lot of their time and effort on purporting. And then you bring up the portals, Rodney. Yeah, absolutely. Could that be another way of transportation? If portals are functional, if portals are real and they function, then I can't see any reason why you can't travel via a portal. I mean, that would be the whole essence of the portal. So in my opinion, could it be some sort of global unconsciousness too? Yeah, it could be part of our psyche as humans. That's quite the possibility. But I think if they were able to make the ancient people these massive stone monuments, couldn't it be that they were able to also travel in a more efficient manner than by sea alone? I think it's possible. And maybe that technology has been found and is hidden from us, or maybe we haven't found it yet completely ourselves, and maybe there's still more discoveries to be had. But maybe there was a possibility that there was an advanced form of travel, whether it involved actual planes or other flying machines or portals that existed that allowed these people to carry on similar ideas in completely disparate locations all across the globe. It's quite fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Well, what is your opinion on maybe that there's a worldwide cover-up of our ancient history? Why do you think so many countries and archaeologists, researchers, scientists, and so forth that find, like you said, an airplane in Egypt or any other like a giant finger that I read that they found in Egypt and so forth? Well, why do you think they cover it up and don't want the common person to know that these items and these peoples were around back then?
Yeah, it always puzzles me, particularly with the giants, right? Because people, Jim Vieira has done extensive work with trying to track down the bones of the giants, and all roads seem to lead to the Smithsonian. And the Smithsonian, he will call the Smithsonian, give them even a record number. I mean, these have been entered into the record of the Smithsonian in the 1800s, for example. And he will say, "What about this?" And they'll say, "Oh, we lost it. We don't have any record of it. We can't find it." I'm running into the same thing here, too, with these two giant elongated skulls that were uncovered in 1970 in Aruba by a Dutchman. and he was living in Curacao, had heard that a local Aruban uncovered a giant skeleton. He went to Aruba, gathered the skulls, brought them back to Curacao, and was trying to get archaeologists to research these skulls. And no archaeologist would even want to research the skulls. No museum wanted to put the skulls on display. So this man was a man of means, and he created his own museum, which is still in existence today, called the Curacao Museum, to house these two skulls. Now, interestingly, when I first started doing my research, I thought, and and just to backtrack, Jim Vieira gave me an article about a reporter in 1980 in Reading, Pennsylvania, who wrote an article on their experience in going to the Curacao Museum and seeing the two giant skulls on display. And very nonchalantly, this journalist says, these are the skulls of the original inhabitants of Aruba, the giants, who were about 7 to 8 feet tall. So up until 1980, these skulls were there. And so then I thought, these skulls need to come back to Aruba. There's an archaeology museum in Aruba with temperature controlled. These are Aruban skulls, and they should be repatriated to Aruba. So I started my quest to find the skulls. So I called the Curacao Museum, which was the last known location, and I spoke to the head curator and the head archaeologist, and interestingly, neither one of them has any idea where the skulls are. They've completely vanished. The museum went through a renovation, and the skulls were confiscated by the government and are believed to be in Holland, although there is no record at all of where the skulls went. I found several archaeological reports talking about these measurements of these skulls and skeletons that these scientists are finding. And the first one that they find is this one skull I mentioned earlier that is a foot long. It's a huge skull. So the one archaeologist who discovers this, he writes down his findings. The next archaeologists who go and read this guy's findings say that let's forget about that measurement. That must be an anomaly. Let's make it this instead. And literally within the body of the archaeological study, changing the measurements of the skull to suit their story that they're about to tell you. So here you have archaeologists reframing things to fit their story. Then you have skulls disappearing. I think that really, you think when it comes to the giants, what's going on? Why are people covering it up? Why are these archaeologists pretending it's not happening? Why won't people speak on record about there being giants, for example, in Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao? And people say often, it's Darwinism. If we say that there were giants, and now look at us, we're not giants, that means we've devolved. We haven't evolved. And so this throws into question the whole concept of evolution. But that's not true, because if you look at Darwin's work, and if anyone who brings up that argument ever takes the time to do so, like I have, you'll see that he speaks often of giant races being found, particularly in Patagonia, which means large foot. And he speaks of the larger stature, of almost giant stature of some of the cultures in South America. So he's very open to study and acknowledging that there are giant people that are not of the same physical attributes as more modern humans. So it can't be Darwinism. So then I think, is it something about people not wanting to admit that maybe the Old Testament in the Bible is correct? Because the Old Testament in the Bible speaks about giants frequently. I mean, David and Goliath is the most famous story about a giant who had 6 fingers and 6 toes, I might add. So could it be that by saying that there weren't giants, then you're not admitting that the Bible could possibly be a historical document that's accurate? Maybe these people don't want us to believe that the Bible is more accurate than it's ever been given credit to at least by the scientists and academia. So that could be a component as well. And then, of course, I think a lot of people spend a lot of time and a lot of money banking their career on an hypothesis that may have, but rather than being fluid with that hypothesis and saying, well, this is where I am today, but if new information comes out, then I will alter my hypothesis to accept this new information. And instead of being able to do that, they are more rigid, and they don't want this other information involved in a thesis that they have spent years and money building, including their own career and reputation on. So, I mean, any of those could be possible, or all of those could be possible reasons why there's such a subversion of these facts. It's just baffles the mind. And I know for my situation, I had actually gone to Columbia University to interview for their PhD program in archaeology about 10 years ago. And what I wanted to really study were the giants, and the giants, particularly those with elongated skulls, or any of the populations with elongated skulls. And I mentioned this to one of the archaeologists, and he looked at me like, and he must be crazy. I mean, you can't. There's no way, you're going to be at Columbia University, the birthplace of archaeology in terms of education in the United States. There, you could not talk about giants. You can't talk about elongated skulls that aren't from normal cranial deformation, because it goes against everything that they're putting out there. They're meaning the university. So I would never have gotten funding. I would have been probably ridiculed and laughed out of the university. So I think it's a combination of all those things, wanting to, protect reputations that have been built on maybe not 100% thought out theses, maybe not to allow the Bible to thrive as a historical document, and also I just think maybe ignorance too plays a role in a lot of this. Maybe it's not all mischievous and malicious, but maybe it's just people just don't know. I mean, when we were in Aruba last summer, my daughter and I and a friend of mine on the island, whose name also happens to be Rodney, we explored 16 caves in Aruba. Now, Aruba has one of the largest cave systems in the entire Caribbean, and 16 is just scratching the surface. There's in Bonaire, there's over 200 caves. In Aruba, I think there's even more than that. And when we were in the caves, we found a petroglyph panel that, as far as I know, as far back as I could go in all the documentation, this is to the early 1800s, it was never discovered. There had never been a discovery of this petroglyph panel. The petroglyphs looked as if they were done yesterday. They were so pristine, and clearly no one had found them. And it was in a weird little alcove of this cavernous, strange cave, and my friend and I, we couldn't believe we found these petroglyphs, and I mentioned them to the archaeologists, and they had no idea of them. They didn't even know they existed. So I think not a lot of it, but some of it is also they just don't know. It's straight up ignorance on the fact.
Wow. Well, since we're running a little low on time, I'll ask you one more question. Have you had any experiences with such as crypto or UFO encounters?
Yeah, I wish I had a crypto encounter, but I have a crypto story. But on the islands, when I used to live in Aruba, I saw UFOs all the time. I saw them during the day. I saw them at night. I was married to my former husband on Aruba, and we had our wedding reception in the desert, and we were when we were leaving, we had a party bus take us from the desert back to the hotels where everyone was staying, and a UFO was literally following us the entire time out of the desert, and it was gliding over the water, just barely over the water, not making a sound. It was some sort of triangle craft, just just really parallel with us the entire time out of the desert. So those islands are very rife with UFO sightings. All three of the islands. I was with people when I saw during the day. I would see UFOs flying crazy all over the place in the islands. They would pop up over here, and then it's over there, and then there would be two, and then there would be five, and then there would be one, and it was crazy. I mean, the speed at which they were traveling, it just boggled the mind. And I was with an older gentleman in Aruba at one point. I said, "What is that in the sky?" And his face was white as a ghost. And I said, "Oh boy, this is really crazy. I wonder what it is." And so, but with cryptids, I haven't personally had an experience with them, but I know that people speak of strange animal sounds emanating from this one place that I believe was man-made, and definitely it was a religious place, a sacred place to the giants, and called Io Rock Formation, where people have heard in the middle of the night strange sounds. It's like an animal, but it's not an animal, and I know I've never heard a recording. But people have also heard these strange animal-like sounds in other parts of Aruba, too. I haven't heard them yet, but if I do, I'll definitely let you know for sure. But it's very, very interesting how paranormal occurrences and these megalithic sites sometimes go hand in hand, which is another interesting component.
That's one thing I've always said since I've been in paranormal is, a lot of people want to go down to the spiritual part of it, but I don't think so. I don't think so much of it is. I think a lot of it has somehow tied in with UFOs and cryptids and ancient sites. I don't know how, I don't know what, but something don't make sense to me.
Well, if we look back at the concept of portals, and if there are indeed portals that a lot of these megaliths are delineating, or maybe the stones that they're choosing are augmenting the power of the portals, then this allows for those things, creatures, beings, UFOs to come in and out of. So, for example, a lot of these sites are by fault lines, are built by fault lines, and it is one theory that these fault lines are the actual portals, and that building these megaliths and having certain solstice events occur, or solar events occur, triggers these portals, and all these things then, could come in and out of these portals. I love Linda Moulton Howe's theory that, for example, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, is really an interdimensional being that comes through these portals with UFOs, and I love that concept. So maybe that's something that is facilitating. These places are facilitating this ability for these beings to come into our dimension and leave, and that's another interesting fact that you bring up.
Oh yeah, I think it's all connected. How it's connected, I don't know, but hopefully I'll live long enough to see, or maybe get an idea of what's going on.
Right. And also, I haven't posted about this yet, but I went to do research at Council Rock here on Montauk, Long Island, which is the beginning of an imaginary line called the Hammondset line that goes from Montauk, Long Island, all the way up through Canada, and has a megalithic ruin of some sort every about 16 to 20-something miles along this line, going all the way to Canada. And I stayed overnight in a hotel that was right adjacent to this stone, and I stayed with my daughter, and I brought a spirit box with me. And I had my spirit box for a couple of years. I was going to bring it to the megalithic chambers here in New York, but I was scared. And so I thought, okay, now I'm going to bring out the spirit box. And for those who don't know, it's this, and you know what it is, right, Ronnie, the spirit box.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of rifles through these frequencies, and as you listen back, if there's someone trying to communicate with you, it will come through on, when you're playing this back. So I started playing with it in the hotel room. I was going to take it down to the Council Rock, and I, did a couple of minutes and then listened back. And I was just trying to actually just get a feel for the equipment. I wasn't thinking in any way I was going to be recording something. And it's about the fourth try of just playing around with it, I listened back and I heard a man's voice come through clear as day and screaming in an angry tone, "That's it. That's it." Oh my gosh, I threw the box. I said, "Oh my gosh, what's going on here?" I ended up doing research, and the hotel where we were staying, called the Montauk Manor, is probably one of the most haunted hotels on the northeastern seaboard, which I had no idea of because my whole focus was just this rock and had nothing to do with the hotel. And I found out it was one of the most haunted places. And then after quizzing some of the people, the staff, they all had supernatural occurrences, particularly late at night. They saw an Indian chief, and they would hear chanting. And it turns out when the original owner, Carl Fisher, purchased the land in 1920 to build the manor, they came across Indian burials. And Carl Fisher's instructions to the builders were grind up the bones and put them into the cement of the hotel. And from that moment forward, the hotel has been completely haunted and literally one of the most haunted places in the United States. And from that night forward, my daughter slept in bed with me. She was so scared, and I didn't blame her at all because I was kind of a little creeped out too. But I think these places, these rocks, these things, they're all around these portals that allow for these beings and this type of travel between dimensions.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, we're almost out of time, so real quick, what are your plans for the rest of the year, and do you have a website for people to go to, if they got any concerns or or any questions or comments, and how can everyone get a copy of your book?
Yes, so hopefully my book, Rodney, will be done by your conference, Phantom Fest, which is in November 2nd, which I will be speaking at. A lot of what I discussed about the islands, the skeletal remains are all in my presentation. I have photos of all the skeletal remains, the elongated skulls, giant skulls, the rock formations, the megaliths, and I have 85 photos of fun and strange things that I show everyone. So I'll be going next month to Aruba and Bonaire. I'll be gone for over a month, and I'll be researching in those two islands, and then I'll be incorporating that information that I gather into the book, which will, God willing, be done by November. I don't have a website as yet, but that is in the works, particularly all the crazy things going on with censorship with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. It's really important now more than ever to have another place for people to see you and find you. But until then, I am on Facebook. I run a couple of pages. I have my own page, Heather L. Arnold, and then I have the Islands of the Giants is a Facebook page, and I have my group, Stones, Bones, and the Paranormal. I'm on Instagram as Heather L. Arnold and as The Islands of the Giants. They're two separate Instagram accounts. And I'm also on Twitter as Heather L. Arnold and The Island of the Giants. I'm going to be recording my talk with you, Rodney, and I believe it will be live streamed. And I'll be connecting to that, the recording of the conference, of my talk at the conference as well. A lot of people after I was at the past one wanted to see my talk, but we weren't able to get pretty good quality footage. So I'm hoping this next conference we'll be getting some good footage to put up there for people to see the talk because they're curious. Yep. And yeah, so that's my plan so far. And then of course a lot of hikes. So I'm way behind on my postings of some hikes that I've done to strange megalithic sites here in New York State. So I'll be posting them. So definitely go to Heather L. Arnold on Facebook and The Islands of the Giants on Facebook. And the group is completely active all the time, Stones, Bones, and the Paranormal. And as I said, hopefully my book will be done in November. It's called The Islands of the Giants, The Lost Race of Giants of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. It's 100% based off of the archaeological record, so it can be cross-referenced, and everyone can enjoy the bibliography and check it out for themselves. And I want to thank you, Rodney, for, again, giving me an opportunity to not only be on your show tonight, but also to be a guest speaker again at your conference. I had so much fun at the conference. I really enjoyed it. I met so many interesting people, and it was a real honor to be speaking there.
Oh, thank you. And, I thank you for coming on the show tonight. Like I said, you're welcome. Come on anytime that you like, because I just, you're just a fountain of knowledge that I just love to, listen from, and had a great time with you. I wish I was able to spend more time with you last year at the fest, but I'm going to this year, and we're going to get you set up to where you and everyone else could get a better quality of videos for y'all's the speaking. Because that was the first time we did it, and the camera was way too far back to get any good quality of audio or video. So that's my fault, and I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. I know it was the first conference, and quite frankly, I thought it was very professionally done, and I loved the location where it was. It was great. I loved it. I loved everything about it, the people running it, you. I thought it was very organized. And but now and I like the idea of live streaming for the next conference, too. I think people will enjoy that, too.
Yeah, we've stepped it up a little bit doing the live streaming. And also, we had 8 speakers last year. This year we got 20. And
wow.
Yeah, we've got
That's
people
great.
from they're coming from Oregon, your neck of the woods, in New York, all the way down from Florida. I mean, I cannot believe that it doubled up within a year, and
wow.
I'm very proud of it, and I hope to keep it growing. And people like you and Bill Reap and some other people that they're coming back. That just amazed me, and I appreciate it so much, because my area,
thank you.
my area needs knowledge. These people, they hungry for it, but they're so, they don't really want to bring it out in public, I guess. And then when you have something like this in our area, they're like, oh yes, finally.
Yeah, I thought the turnout was great. I'm so happy for you that it's gotten so much bigger in less than a year, essentially. I mean, that is incredible. I'm so proud of you and so proud of what you've done. And it's a lot of work, I know. It's a lot of effort. So if we don't get to chit-chat in November, I totally understand. It's a huge undertaking that you're doing. And I'm just happy to have been invited and to be there.
Well, it's like I said, it's an honor to have you and so many the guests back, and speaking of speakers, and having more new people that that's in the UFO Bigfoot area and so forth. I just want to genre to everything about the paranormal, cryptid, ancient. So I want it all because, like I said, there's just so many people in my area that's so hungry for this, and to learn from you all, it amazes me, and we couldn't do it without you all. If it hadn't been for you all coming down here and taking y'all's time out of y'all's busy schedule, it wouldn't be possible.
Oh, well, thank you. And and I just appreciate any opportunity I have to express what I know about the giants to anyone, because it's I don't think there's any other way to find out this knowledge unless from me, because no one's going to put in 10 years of work to research something like this, and I wouldn't recommend it. It's become an obsession, but I love it, and I love the response that I got, and I encourage people to come see us in November. And it's a beautiful part of the country at that time of year. I mean, every place is a picture. The leaves are changing, and the weather is still nice, and it was such a beautiful place to be in November.
Well, we greatly appreciate it, and you have a happy Mother's Day this weekend.
Thank you so much, and enjoy it with your family, Rodney. And I hope you feel better.
Oh, I appreciate that. I hope I do too. If not, I won't have to go down to Kentucky and meet up with some of my friends that carry the moonshine and take care of business that way.
Exactly. Yes, that would work too. So I hear.
Well, I'll let you go. And again, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Oh, likewise, Rodney. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'll see you in November.
Okay. Well, you have a good night and a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye.
Well, that's it for us tonight. I want to thank Heather Arnold for coming on the show, and thank everyone that took the time to listen in. Our guest for next Thursday night, guest, let me put the S on there, May 16th will be Moonshiners Teresa Mays and Donnie Benton. They're from the hit TV show Discovery's Moonshiners. So thanks again, everyone. Till next week. Everyone have a great Mother's Day, especially all you mothers out there. Have a great Mother's Day weekend. Everyone have a great time. Give your mamas a love, some hugs and kisses, and just like I'm going to do mine. So you all have a good night, and thank y'all for listening. Let's see. That's it for us tonight. I want to thank everyone that took the time to listen in. I'd like to give a big shout out to the Vibe Radio Network and to Ryan for putting up with us. Also to all the first responders and our men and women in the armed services. Thank you for your service and the sacrifices that you and your families make every day to keep our great nation safe. Tune in next week to another exciting show starting at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Everyone can go to our Facebook page Within the Chaos, and don't forget to like our page to see upcoming guests along with past shows, postings, or you can also go to my website at www.blackdiamondps.org or blogtalkradio.com/Vibe Radio Network. Also, we have a YouTube channel, so go to YouTube. Look up Within the Chaos for past shows. Thanks again. Until next week, everyone have a safe weekend and have a good night. And love you all. Be careful out there.
I'm sorry. But I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent, and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world, millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, or what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!